3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. If you are joining us for the first time, as like 90% of our audience today is, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And you are catching us on a very exciting day because today is smack dab in the middle of our big Ocean Week celebration. We've got 21 programs of the coolest scientists and explorers on planet Earth, everything from cave divers to astronauts this week. You can check them all out on our YouTube channel if you haven't signed up for the whole bunch. Lots to explore and discover right there. But it's also a bittersweet day because it's the last day of our epic World Wildlife Fund series. Now, all year long, we have partnered with far and away the most well-known, the most iconic conservation organization on planet Earth in the WWF. They have shared all sorts of great stories. Beavers is one of my very favorite that we did back in the day. So I encourage you to check out our full channel of them here. There's lots to explore. Again, all of those are on our YouTube channel. Now, before I introduce our speaker du jour and the most popular person in our entire Ocean Week celebration, I want to note we do have a Kahoot today. So between our talk and our Q&A, you can play along with a little 4-question quiz to test your understanding for some bragging rights. We've got the Kahoot grand champions here in Mr. Hancock's class. We've got to try and dethrone them together. But there's our game pin. You can pull that up. A nice little way to keep it extra interactive. But without further ado, Alanna Waldman Carrow is joining us from the WWF to talk about saving our oceans, particularly nature-positive solutions. We're going to learn a little bit about what Nature Positive is all about. We're going to learn about what the World Wildlife Fund is doing to save ocean wildlife. And you know what? You're not here to hear from me anymore. I'm going to zip it and turn you over to her. Alanna, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you so much. I am so thrilled to be here with you all today and so feel very honored that I'm one of the most popular ones. There's so many cool things happening out there, but just very grateful you all wanted to come and learn about saving ocean wildlife with me. I hope you can all see my screen, starting out with some beautiful ocean wildlife and some dolphins. Who doesn't love some dolphins?
Yeah.
So we'll just jump right in.
Let's do it.
So like I said, I am Alanna Waldman Carrow, and I am a marine conservation scientist working at the World Wildlife Fund. So here's a picture of me in the wild doing some marine conservation science, which I will actually talk to you a little bit more in detail later. But my background is in marine biology and coral reef ecology. So I have a lot of expertise with coral reefs in the tropical regions, so the warmer regions of the world. And now I'm applying that knowledge and science to my work here at World Wildlife Fund. And I'm specifically on the Nature Positive for Oceans team. Now, this was mentioned as a phrase, and it's sort of a new phrase that's come out recently. And let me explain to you what that means. So Nature Positive for Oceans, the very scientific description is halting and reversing biodiversity loss in the oceans. But more simply is we want to have more animals and more wildlife in the ocean in the future than we have today. As you can see from this graph, so I'm sure you all have seen graphs in your math classes with x-axis on the bottom and y on along the side, and we're looking to change this decline. So right now we're declining and we're losing biodiversity and marine species and all that wonderful ocean life that we all get so excited about. But there are things that we as society that everyone can do to actually what we call bend this curve. So we can bend the curve upwards so that we actually see more wildlife and we can support nature to regenerate and rejuvenate and repair and rehabilitate so that there's more habitat, so places for animals to live, and so that they can continue to thrive and grow and produce more marine species so that we have more ocean wildlife. And every time we go to the beach or to the coast, that will hopefully see more wildlife if we can implement these actions. So this is what I'm working on, and I'm going to talk about those actions as we move through this presentation. So why are we losing ocean wildlife? It's a great question. There are a lot of things happening that sadly impact the ocean. So for one, I'm sure you've all heard of this, it's climate change. So because of emissions of cars and planes, there's more heat in the atmosphere. And so it's making everything hotter. And when the atmosphere gets hotter, the ocean gets hotter because the ocean absorbs that heat. And with that heat changing, it actually changes what happens in the ocean. And some animals are just too hot and they can't live in these conditions. Another impact is overfishing. So if we think about what we eat on seafood, sadly, sometimes fishing can take more out of the ocean than we need and even catch things we don't want to catch. It can also, the nets and the different tools they use can also impact the bottom of the ocean, destroying the places where other species live. Another major impact is marine and coastal development. So think of building something by the beach, so like a hotel or a port where ships come in or bring their fish. Although we need these structures, sometimes they're not built in a way that thinks about ocean wildlife or the habitats and where the species live. So it can damage really diverse ecosystems. So very abundant habitats where a lot of different ocean wildlife organisms live. And these biodiverse ecosystems, is what we call them in the scientific realm, include reefs, kelp forests, mangroves, salt marshes, dunes, and seagrass beds. Now, I'm going to click through a few pictures of each of these and just talk about them a little bit more in case you have never seen them in real life. So the first are reefs, which are some of the most biodiverse habitats in the world. And this means they host so many species. And coral reefs specifically host 25% and support 25% of all marine animals in the ocean. And they, as you can see, a dolphin is enjoying the reef here, but they have fish and lobster and oysters and mussels and all different parts. So there's not only just coral reefs, but there are also rocky reefs. And they are also key in protecting us as humans. So not only are they home for fish and other species, but they also protect our homes. So because of their structure, you see that they almost look like brains and they're complex. They actually reduce and waves that can come and hit shore, and so they protect our communities. But sadly, because of increasing temperatures from climate change, we are seeing a loss of corals. So we have to think about ways in which we can prevent losing these really important habitats. Here's another beautiful image, and you can see this crazy structures and all these little places for fish and other creatures to live. And also the friction when the waves move across those reefs, it slows down the waves so it protects our coastlines. Then we also have kelp forests. So these are in the colder waters. So we're going to think about like Washington State or Alaska, where it's chilly, but you have these forests that are almost like forests on land because they support all different types of creatures, from fish to seals to sea urchins to otters. And they're really important for this part of the world, and because of the habitat they provide. Here's another really cool image of a seal swimming through, probably looking for some food, or maybe just swimming through as habitat. They like to hang out in the kelp forest because it also provides them protection from other predators that might want to eat them. In the warmer parts of the world, you're going to find mangroves. So at first, they just kind of look like regular trees. But what's really interesting is they exist on the coast. So between the shallow waters of the ocean and the beaches, they grow and they have these really extensive root systems that trap sediments, but also great place for fish to hide, and even birds to nest, which I'll show you a picture in a minute of the birds nesting. They're also, just like reefs, protect the coastline and protect our communities from big storms or waves. And because they support fish, it helps with creating jobs for fishermen, because these fish are born in the mangroves, they're protected, they don't get eaten by bigger fish, so that they can grow big and strong and then move out to the reefs where they can live on the reefs and then potentially become food for us in the future. Here's a fun picture of sharks spending time in mangrove roots, and these are juvenile sharks. And then here's another image, like I noted, a frigate bird, which is sitting in a mangrove in a nest. You can't see the nest, but frigate birds often nest in the mangroves. And then on the right, we have the jellyfish and some snapper hanging out in the mangrove roots. Also, in the colder regions, you have salt marshes. And if you're in Virginia, especially, or Maryland, or along in New England, you might see salt marshes, which are similar to mangroves in what they do. They protect coastlines, but you just find them in the colder weather rather than the hot tropical weather. But they filter pollutants coming, which means like any trash or anything that's coming from us on land, it filters it through. And so it doesn't go into the ocean. And it also supports creatures like crabs, which we often eat. If you have ever been to the beach, you've probably seen a lot of sand, but you've also probably seen mounds of sand. And at first they seem rather unimportant, but these dunes are actually very important for the coast. They also protect the coastline, and vegetation often grows on them where other creatures can nest, like sea turtles. So sea turtles love nesting in dunes. So they'll come up the beach and they'll find a great spot on dunes and lay their eggs, which is why dunes are very important on many different coasts around the world. And seagrass beds are also important. So if you think about the grass on our lawns, it's sort of like that, but in the ocean. And they do a lot to protect us, even though it just looks like regular grass. A lot of different creatures live in there. And even though it's not tall like mangroves or big like dunes, these seagrass beds actually also protect the coastline while also creating habitat for so many different creatures like this nurse shark here or this southern stingray. So now that we've talked about all the biodiverse habitats, what can we do to stop ocean wildlife loss? Well, everyone has a role to play. So us as a society through individual actions, this is something like thinking about riding our bike instead of taking a car or a plane somewhere if possible because we want to reduce our emissions, or thinking about when we go to the store, if we can go to the store and pick up a can and see what kind of tuna and where we're getting it from, and even just supporting companies that do actions that support nature. But also, just as important, are governments. So governments should think about ways in which they can make sure everyone is doing the right thing. And these are called policies. So policies to make sure that whenever anyone is doing anything, the ocean, wildlife, and nature are protected. We also need scientists to continue researching the ocean and understanding the ocean so that we can provide information to governments and people on what is right to do, what we should avoid, and what we should strive to do to be better and to support ocean wildlife. And finally, where I focus mostly on my work is working with companies and businesses. Now, we don't often think about businesses as having a really big impact on nature, but they really do. And there's so many things that they can do to protect ocean wildlife. And I'm going to talk to you about these now. The major companies that I work with include offshore wind. So think of big windmills, but in the water, shipping. So big ships that carry a lot of different products around the world, coastal and marine tourism. So think about hotels on the beach, and seafood. So the food we eat, but from the ocean. So I'll start off with offshore wind. Some of you may have seen these big windmills on land. But we're actually starting to build these in the ocean. Now, why do we need these? Well, if you've ever charged anything, your phone, your computer, your electronics, any type of electronics, your refrigerator, you need electricity. And there are different ways you can get electricity. Now, there's burning coal and gas, or there's renewable energy. And this means harnessing the power of our world, so the sun and the wind, to power. And it's a lot more sustainable, meaning we have fewer emissions, and it's really good for the environment. And offshore wind is one of those renewable energy sources that we're starting to use around the world. Although it's really good, sometimes building these turbines in the ocean can impact ocean wildlife. Birds might fly into them, whales might have a collision, or the noise of building them can cause disruption or disorientation, so it scares away animals. But there are things we can do and recommend to these companies that are not very hard but make a huge difference. For example, they can actually build the turbines at different heights so that they avoid the pathways of birds or even bats, because bats often fly around water bodies as well. They can also place turbines in areas that might not have kelp forests or mangrove areas nearby or coral reefs. So if they place it in a part of the ocean that is not really as important for habitat, that really helps. And then finally, making sure that they're working with scientists and researchers and the community to see where are whales migrating, where are the turtles, where are the dolphins, and making sure they are protected and their pathways and where they eat and where they sleep and where they forage are protected, and putting the turbines away from them so that we don't disorient them or hurt them in any way. Next, we work with shipping companies. So, if you've ever ordered anything online, it is very likely that it has been transported either by a plane or by a really big ship like you see here. So, most of our transport around the world happens through shipping. So, there are a lot of ships at any one time all around the world transporting our goods from one continent to the next. So, while it's really convenient, sometimes all of these boats can run into other animals like whales or turtles or dolphins, and it can cause a really big impact. The ships are also really loud underwater, and this underwater noise can confuse the animals, especially those that need to hear and listen to communicate with each other, to find where they're going, to know where they're supposed to be going. So, there's shipping definitely, while it's very important, it does have some pretty big impacts on our ocean wildlife. But there are ways for the shipping industry to reduce this. So they should definitely look similar to the offshore wind, should look into where the whales exist, where the other habitats exist, and make sure they plan their routes from one location to the next, away from these important habitats and where a lot of species live. Sadly, on the right hand image, one of this is a ship that actually ran into a coral reef because they did not plan their route well. So you want to avoid running into the reefs and knowing where those reefs are. So this comes from the research that scientists are doing, and making sure you avoid reefs or avoid really important places where species are living, and that will help reduce animal impact. Similarly, with all the new technology out there, they can actually incorporate renewable energy like solar panels or even wind devices to help power them, so it reduces the noise of these really loud engines, as well as potential for pollution from oil and gas from the boat getting into the water and making animals sick. So there's a lot of different ways ships can be built now that can make it so that they have way less impact on the habitats, and animals are a lot happier when the ships are passing by. Next, we have coastal tourism. So we work with hotels and places that are in destinations by the ocean. And while obviously beach vacations are really fun, sometimes when buildings are built on the ocean and there's a lot of activity near the ocean, it can disrupt and scare the animals. So sometimes too many people scares animals away from their homes, or the actual buildings can change the dunes where sea turtles potentially nest, or the coral reefs, or the kelp forests, or the salt marshes that are nearby. So it's really important that hotels really think about what they're doing before they even begin to build their properties or where they're going to have guests. Some of that includes making sure they keep the dunes, they maintain the beach, they don't touch the corals, or they just build in a spot that doesn't have these sensitive habitats. As I mentioned earlier, sea turtles nest on dunes. And because of that, it's really important to keep them. And here's some pictures of one on the bottom left, a sea turtle dropping her eggs in a dune on the beach. Then above that, we have sea turtles actually hatching and coming out of the nest, and then a hatchling swimming in the ocean. And this is what we want to see. And we want to make sure that everyone and who's enjoying the beach, from hotels to visitors, make sure that they're protecting these habitats so that, for example, sea turtles can continue to nest and continue to make more babies, so that we have more turtles in the ocean than we do today. Also, sometimes the lighting from hotels can influence wildlife. So, making sure that hotels implement wildlife friendly lighting is really important, and something really easy that they can do. They can find it and buy online. I did mention that I was going to bring up this photo again. Hotels can also invest in doing reef restoration of any type, whether it's coral reefs or oysters or mussels. I actually participated in doing a big coral reef restoration where we put in modules that are these big rock-like structures and began planting corals on it so that we could restore a reef that had been impacted. And as you can see, only a few days, actually moments later after we started planting the corals, fish came, and there have been many other species that came. So there's a lot of different ways that coastal hotels and other actors can do restoration in a way that provides more habitat for key animals in the ocean. Finally, we have seafood. I'm sure many of you have had a piece of fish or a mussel or an oyster, and we think we get it from the store, but where does it come from before that? And it comes from fishermen on boats, and they use nets and different type of tools to catch these fish, but sometimes they catch things they don't need to catch, like this poor turtle in this net. So there is a big impact. And while they want to catch only the fish that we're going to eat, they sometimes catch other things. And this is called bycatch. And sadly, this turtle is a victim of bycatch. But there are ways in which we can do fishing and aquaculture. So aquaculture is growing fish or food in a different way, but in an environment within the ocean, in a way that is better for marine animals. On the left-hand side, you see mussels being grown. So instead of going out and taking mussels from their natural habitat where they're happy and they're safe, they have actually made it so they can grow their own mussels so that those can go to market instead of taking the ones that are naturally on the reef. As you'll see on the right-hand image, this is called a turtle excluder device. So this device is actually attached to boats when they're trying to capture fish, and it allows the turtle to escape so they don't get caught like that poor turtle in the image before. So there's many ways that the seafood industry can implement different tactics that help the ocean wildlife and make sure that turtles or whales or dolphins or other fish that they don't need to catch are not caught. And then making sure that we're not taking wildlife from other natural places and then using aquaculture in a way that supports growing more and not taking away from what already exists. That actually concludes my presentation, but I'm so excited to jump into the questions and go back and answer any questions you may have or talk to any of the slides from before. And I hope you learned something new, and I leave you with my favorite ocean creature, the octopus, as they are extremely intelligent and very cool. And then another beautiful image of seals in a kelp forest.
Very, very cool. Alanna, thank you so much. If you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation, that is just an incredible deep dive into some really special ecosystems, some of the things, threats facing them, and what we can do to help. It's going to lead very nicely into our Kahoot together over the next few minutes before we dive in with Q&A. But I hope all your thinking caps are on. Our live classes, there's like a bazillion of you in New York in that classroom. Way to go. We're looking very forward to your questions. If you're on YouTube, you can share in the chat anytime, starting effective immediately. We have lots of time for Q&A because you made a really nice and crisp presentation. So lots of time together over the next 20 minutes. But let's dive in with our Kahoot first. And so for those who are new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get, and what you win is Alanna and I's everlasting respect. So no pressure at all, bragging rights for life. And if you want to help us out with any of the answers as we get closer to the end of each of these questions coming in, you're welcome to chime in with some hints. But we're going to get underway with this, and then we are heading to Mr. Hancock's class for our first question before we head to our horde of kids in New York, and then our YouTubers as well. So let's get started with this and dive right in, literally and figuratively, with our kelp forest in the background too. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, and question number 1. What is nature positive looking to accomplish as a goal? You shared a little chart earlier. Is it looking to make everyone feel good about nature? Looking to find more cute pictures of animals looking happy? Halt and reverse nature loss by 2030 and achieve recovery by 2050? Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Or stop thinking of nature loss as negative. Oh, who needs nature? No, that's not what we're all about here at World Wildlife Fund and Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. The answer, of course, is B, yes. So this is a really ambitious goal. And 2030, I want to note for those who might not be aware too, 30 by 30 is another global effort, including all the world's conservation organizations, to protect 30% of the lands and waters on this planet by 2030. And there's actually been remarkable strides towards making that happen in the last few years alone. Like, it's a really exciting time for conservation because so many governments and organizations are taking it so seriously. So way to go, everyone who got that right. Adorable duck, you have our lead. All right, I've got 3 true or falses. I almost never have 3 true or falses, but I wanted to just really drive home some key ways that we can protect nature. An easy way to help save wildlife is to have ships slow down in areas full of that wildlife. True or false? We actually, Alanna, just yesterday in Canada, we confirmed this, I think, in British Columbia's ports to slow down ships a little more to help protect the orcas there, which is very exciting. So
fantastic.
It's
That's
really
a huge win.
And it really, like, it costs almost nothing to the ships to do this, and it saves whales and all sorts of wildlife, and we have lots of data on this. Like, it's a really, really easy solution.
It's easy, and it reduces the amount of emissions. When they're going slower, they're not producing as much of that gross, nasty gas in the air to increase climate change. So it's a win-win solution.
Win for all. And dazzled sea lion, not ironically a sea creature, has taken our lead. So I hope a sea creature does win our challenge today. We plant coral reefs and repurpose old things as coral beds. Is this true or false? You highlighted this in your talk. You had by a thing. We've covered this as a topic a lot. And in fact, not too long ago, they took a whole ocean liner out of, what harbor was that? They're sending it down to Florida?
Yeah, I think it came out of New York and down to Florida. I have some definitely insights into that we can talk about if we have time, but it's really very interesting. Artificial reefs are a very interesting and important piece, but the research and the right people have to be on the team to make the decision. So it's a really cool but intense process.
Really cool, but needs some really good oversight. Now,
yes,
true is our correct answer. Dazzled Sea Lion keeps our lead, barely. Going into our final question before we head to our Q&A. Visiting wildlife on the water can help ensure its survival. I'm actually going on a whale tour in like 5 days. I've been on many whale tours. I've been very lucky to see lots of whales. I'm off on a boat, not one this small. So am I helping wildlife or am I hurting wildlife by doing that? And again, it does depend. But the essence here that we're trying to highlight is that when it's done well, the answer can be a resounding true. And most of you got that right. Now, this is true both on land and in the water. When we do ecotourism responsibly, it means that we value the animals in the ecosystem more alive than dead, and they become a resource for the community. They become something where we actively have them come back. Gorillas are a great example of this, that have come back from really on the brink to be quite a bit more numerous because we have sustainable ecotourism in some other areas. So I'm really glad you all got this right. Dazzled Sea Lion for our win. Thank you so much for playing along, everybody. And we're diving in with Q&A now. Let's do this thing. Mr. Hancock in Georgetown, did you guys win the Kahoot? And then share your first question too. What do we think?
We did have a dazzling sea lion in here.
Yeah.
Lots of excitement.
Way to go.
So we did have lots of questions. Unfortunately, you answered most of them. So great presentation. One student did ask, what's your favorite animal and why is it your favorite animal?
No pressure.
Right?
No pressure. So it actually is the octopus that I had shown on the last slide. Octopuses, yes, that is the plural of octopus, are so interesting as creatures. They're some of the smartest creatures in the ocean, but also on this planet. And I find them so fascinating and so curious. And every time I've been diving, I interact with one. I always wonder what they're thinking. And I think they're at the same level of thought processes as we are as humans, very, very close. So they're really cool and they're very creative and they're ingenious in some of the ways that they camouflage or use tools like that one I showed at the end, using a coconut to protect itself. So that's my answer.
That's a great answer. Most biologists do not have an answer to that question, but if you had to pick one, they are so... I used to work at Ripley's Aquarium in Toronto, and the octopus would remember people by face and would squirt water at people they didn't like and would reach out and touch people that they did like. They were very excited about that. They're such amazing animals. My Octopus Teacher is an amazing documentary on them, and a lot of you who have streaming should check that out. It's just a wild ride into the life of a single animal. Very, very neat. All right, Concord Road Elementary, and maybe the entire town. It looks like that many kids. Hi, guys. Welcome in. There's so many of you. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Hi. Do you have any questions for Alanna?
Hi, guys.
You can unmute.
Oh, hi. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
Are there any questions you have, or are you just really excited?
We have two classes actually in the same room today.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions though?
All right, let's see.
Lots.
All right, my friend here with the glasses, look right up at the camera really loud.
What type of sea turtle was the sea turtle swimming after you talked about the sea turtles nesting in the dune?
Yeah.
That's a
Cool.
great question. Let me make sure I'm looking at. I have a few pictures of sea turtles in my presentation. That one is a hawksbill sea turtle.
Oh, my favorite.
Those are
They're
very common. Well, actually, a lot of sea turtles are endangered, so which is
Yep.
why we have to protect them. But they're often found in the tropics and the Caribbean. That's where I've seen most of them, and I've actually had the pleasure of seeing a hawksbill turtle nest hatch
Oh.
with the hatchlings going into the ocean, and it's a really special thing. So if any of you get the chance to volunteer with sea turtle teams around the world, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful, exciting experience.
I'm so glad that you mentioned this specifically. So Mr. Hancock's class was here for this earlier today. We were live at the Turtle Hospital in Marathon, Florida with a bunch of sea turtles, including loggerheads, green sea turtles, everything that's on our YouTube channel. So if you're a sea turtle fanatic and you want to follow up with some really great stuff, that's a really great resource for everybody. We're going to head to YouTube for a second. So when it comes to ships slowing down, do we have like a benchmark for this? Is there a speed they should go? Is there a place that does this really, really well in the world? I know these are big questions, but anything you can share.
Big. This is great. And I would say shipping is a really interesting sector. They're very new in the space of nature positive. They've focused a lot of their attention on the other global goal. So nature positive for ocean is for global goal for biodiversity. And then there's another global goal, and that's for climate. It's called the Paris Climate Agreement. And it's making sure that we reduce our emissions so that we can keep the warming of our planet at a minimum, so that we make sure we keep the same climate and we don't destroy these habitats that I mentioned earlier. So they've really focused on what we call decarbonization. So focused on emissions more than they've focused on biodiversity at this point in time. But that is where they're looking to go. So I will say that there have been examples in the Mediterranean of ships slowing down by a certain percentage, which has helped reduce collisions as well as emissions. But there are still more data collection needed to really pinpoint what that speed reduction is exactly. So I don't have an exact number for you, but that's exciting because it means there's still more research for scientists to be done. But I would say just in general, if you've ever been on a boat, they have no wake zones. So no wake means there's no waves coming off the back of your boat. So making sure that they're slowing down, that there's no waves, it's not creating any turbulence in the water, that's a good place to start visually. But in terms of reducing knots, I don't have a number for you right now, but I hope soon there will be one.
A global standard, maybe in reports coming out in the not too distant future from amazing conservation organizations. And you said something in that answer that I love, because it's something that I just want to highlight for our kids. You will never, ever in your lives hear a scientist say, we've collected enough data. That will never be something they say. Scientists are always looking for more information, because the more we know, the better informed we are to make good decisions on behalf of ourselves and wildlife around this planet. So I just love that you highlighted that. Thank you so much. A potentially easier one. When did you start diving, and do you have a favorite dive? Is there a favorite place, and what's your origin story?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I started diving in college. So I went to the University of Southern California, and I was able to actually get my certifications there through school, as I was an environmental scientist major. So I learned to dive off of Catalina Island in kelp forest. And one quick funny story is one time on one of my practice dives, I got caught in the kelp. It was so dense and I needed my dive buddy to come help me. So I started there. I started as a scientific diver, and now I am a dive master. So that is one below instructor. So there's different levels, and that means you can do different things or have different certifications. So I started then, and I've loved it ever since. And I have used it to in my graduate degree, when I got my master's in marine biology and coral reef ecology, I would go diving almost every day to collect data in Florida along the Southeast Florida reef tract, where I collected data on corals and sponges and the soft corals, and was lucky enough to see turtles swimming by and manta rays and stingrays. But I will say my favorite, I know I'm very, very lucky. It's been such an incredible journey. That's my quick journey through scientific diving. But if my quick tip is, if any of you are interested in becoming a marine biologist, I would highly recommend looking into scuba diving when you're old enough. I think it's 15, because it's just a great way to be in the water, to see everything, collect data, and it's just going to bring you really far in the career. And then my favorite place I've ever been, also through school, I got to go to Micronesia, which is Palau, which is a very tiny bit of islands, far away, at least far away from the US. And it has some of the most incredible coral cover, fish life, sharks, and it was amazing. And I did it a long time ago, and I would absolutely love to go back now that I know even more in my career and can appreciate it even more.
Even more. Did you see the jellyfish when you're in Palau? Like, that's the famous. Okay.
I did. I swam with those jellyfish that don't sting you, which is really exciting.
It's like a magical area that there are like millions of them around you, and you have no risk at all. And it's like when most divers go to Palau for that. So I'm glad we highlighted that. On the note of diving, I always like to highlight this for kids. So at 10 years old, you can start on the path to open water certification, which is what I have. It's like the lowest level of diving. It's like magic. You can breathe underwater. And even younger, at 8 years old, you can do a program called Paddy Bubble Maker, where you start learning to breathe underwater with scuba tanks. So as early as you can, get out, and you can be in Iowa, you can be in Saskatchewan, you can be in the middle of a continent, and like lakes, quarries, pools, like there's lots of opportunities for divers. I learned in a quarry in Toronto. So get out there. It opens up 70% of the world to you if you learn how to dive. So very, very cool. All right. We're going to head back to Mr. Hancock's class for a second one. Come on in and take us away, guys. Hey.
Hey, one of our students was wondering, they're really curious about the kelp forest. Do fish also eat plants?
Ooh.
Yes, fish eat lots of different things. It depends on which fish species. So sometimes fish are carnivorous and they eat other fish, but some eat algae and plants. So they can nibble at the kelp, but also, especially on the coral reef, there's algae that grows on the reefs in some places where corals aren't growing, and they nibble on that. So yes, they can be herbivorous as well.
Yeah, I always like to highlight the kelp forest too, because it's sort of the classic story in conservation biology is that people wiped out a lot of the sea otters along the United States and Canadian coasts. And when the sea otters were gone, the sea otters like to eat all the urchins. And so now there's nothing to eat the urchins. The urchins ate the kelp forest went away, and all the fish died because they had nowhere to live and nothing to eat. So we brought back the sea otter, and that helped the whole ecosystem. So it's just this really incredible, easy to understand story. I will say too, and I'm so glad you highlight the kelp forest so much. When we had like the world's best diver on the other day, like major documentary cover of the thing diver person in the world, and she says her favorite dive site is the kelp forest.
Wow.
So it's a really, really special place, even if you've been all over this planet. And I love when we get questions. So thank you, Mr. Hancock. Let's head back to our double class. Hey guys, welcome back in. And do you have a second question for us? Hi. I love your energy. Come to more next year. But what is your question?
Okay, Olivia, ask your question very loud.
Olivia?
You said that your favorite animal is an octopus, and I know that octopuses have 9 brains, and that they have 8 tentacles, and they can fall off. But when they lose the tentacle, does the heart go off with it, and does it grow back?
You mean the brain?
Yeah, does the brain go back?
Yeah. So any organs that are involved with the tentacles, when they lose one of those arms, what's going on in there, and does it come back?
Yes, they can grow them back. I'm pretty sure. I what's funny is I am a coral reef ecologist, an expert at corals, and although octopuses are my favorite creature, I am not an octopus expert, but I'm pretty sure they can grow them back. But what's another interesting fact is once they lay their eggs, the females actually that's their last blast. They make sure their babies are safe, and then they pass on. But I think before that time they can regrow their tentacles.
Yes. And so when they grow them back, anything that is affiliated with them will grow back with them.
Yes.
Octopus are like But this is so fun. We were talking about salamanders in a program the other day, and there's so many creatures that have these amazing regenerative powers where, like, if you lose an arm, you do not grow it back. Be safe, kids. But octopus, salamanders, some lizards, like easy peasy, pop it right back, do it again and again. They're really, really special creatures. I really encourage you to look up more octopus stuff because they are so awesome. Alanna, time flies and you're having fun. We are nearing the end of the broadcast. And so for our kids, I'm going to encourage you, check out Nature Positivity on wwf.panda.org. There's lots there. WWF.org, just broadly everything that they've done. And if you want to check out our full series with them, it's right here. They'll all be on our YouTube channel. So there's so much to explore there. And please do just catch us for the rest of Ocean Week. We got a few more programs to wrap and then like 5 more before the school year is done. And we'll have to bring Alanna back in September because she's just rocked. So much fun. Before we bring in our kids to say goodbye, though, is there any last message you want to leave us with about your amazing work or anything before we say goodbye?
I would just say I work with so many incredible, inspiring people. It takes a community and a village to do all of this work, and we need more champions for the ocean. And while we have a lot of nature champions, the ocean needs champions too. So if any of you, as you're learning about all of this and you're interested, follow your passions and find the different communities and people that share those passions. Continue to learn, continue to grow. If you can dive, go dive. I didn't even know you could start so early, and if you have that opportunity, whether it's in a pool, whether it's in a quarry or it's on the ocean, I just highly recommend getting in the water, seeing nature and being part of nature because it inspires us all. And it's just seeing these creatures just changes you. And when you get to see them in real life or even in the aquarium, even just going to the aquarium, that changed my life. That was when I decided I wanted to be a marine biologist at 8 years old. So just really encourage you to continue learning, continue inspiring others and get out there in nature.
Okay. What a beautiful message, and one we've heard echoed throughout the entirety of Ocean Week. And I'm so glad you mentioned an aquarium too, because some of us are not in places that are teeming with wildlife. If you're in the heart of a major city, that might not be the case. But if you go to a place where there is wildlife and you connect with it in some way, it can really make a transformative difference in your life. A lot of our speakers that have come on this broadcast over the last 10 years started by seeing something that could have been in captivity. Well done, captivity, worth noting that. But just a beautiful message, Alanna. Thank you so much for your passion, your expertise, all of it. And do stick around after we're done. But before we wrap up, we always bring in our kids for a big thank you and farewell. So Mr. Hancock and our huge horde in New York, double class, thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Bye for now, everyone. We'll see you all soon.